John, thank you so much for joining me. And viewers won't know and listeners won't know that before we came on, I insisted on meeting Pepe, your doggy. I think all people with small dogs are wonderful.
Well, thank you, Maria. I love my little King Charles. He's adorable and fun.
How old is he, by the way?
He's 4
Fantastic. And why Pepe?
because he was just so full of pep and vinegar, and it's just like pep, 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 pep. So that just seemed like the perfect name.
Okay, we won't talk about dogs all day long, although I could, to be honest with you. I want to talk about your area of expertise. And
Mm.
specifically, where did the name The Pitch Whisperer come from?
Well, of course, Maria, I'm going to tell a story to answer that question. 2 years ago, Anthem Insurance was deciding between hiring me and another speaker to come train their nurses and MBAs to not get the new business, but keep the new business. They were having a big struggle that the doctors weren't buying their research on what they needed to do to keep the patients from being readmitted, which is expensive for Anthem. So they said, if the minute the doctor questions these people, they don't have any sales training and they just back off, and it's a big problem. But they don't want to be seen as salespeople. They went to school to be an MBA or a nurse. And I said, what if we invite them to think of themselves as storytellers? And they loved that idea and grabbed onto it. And then I always ask my clients, what else is happening after I give the keynote in the morning? I just want to get the full picture. And they said, at the end of the day, we're going to have an improv session. And we're going to have some people role-playing being the doctors and some people being the Anthem people. And audience members will shout out some objections to see if they can start getting comfortable with them. I said, what if, which is one of my favorite phrases, we asked if I stayed for that improv session and would whisper in their ear some tips from my keynote talk, should they get stuck in the improv. They said, we hadn't even thought of that. We love it. You're hired. And when I was doing that, someone said, oh my gosh, could you always be in my ear when I'm in the field? This is fantastic. And I relayed that story when I was being interviewed for Inc. magazine. And they said, oh, you are the pitch whisperer. And then that's how it stuck.
I love it. I love that. But I want to come back to something you said early on here in this response. Why is it that people don't want to be seen as salespeople? What's wrong with me? You have to sell. If you don't sell, you have no business. What is it with that word, sales?
I think it goes back to the stereotype, Maria, that people think of a used car salesman, or that sales is something you do if you can't do anything else. Or I think what's the underlying, you and I love communication and figuring out what's really going on with people. It's the unspoken fear of rejection. That's the number one reason people don't want to get into it, and the number one reason people get out of it. So I work with people on how to handle rejection, and the key for me is to never take it personally. Because when I used to sell, I would get a no sometimes. Of course, it's just part of the game. And my brain would sometimes kick in and say, I wonder if another person could have gotten them to say yes. Or maybe they're right. They're saying that they like a different product better than your product. And I went, whoa, what am I doing? I'm rejecting myself and what I'm selling. And that's never a good mindset to have. So I thought, I'm just going to assume that the no is no for now, not forever. And most importantly, not reject myself.
Do you know what? I did a podcast recently with somebody who talks about performance from an athlete's point of view. And this resonates really strongly with me because he's saying, don't get attached to the outcome. Make sure you get that process right. So it's the same thing for selling. Don't get attached to the outcome as long as you do the process right. So, and in your case, you're saying actually you will get better selling through storytelling. And I love that. It just flows off the tongue. It's brilliant. I can see why you've got it as a book title. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. So talk me through it. How can I sell better through storytelling?
Well, the first part is to realize that people buy emotionally and not logically. That's such an aha for people, especially in the tech world or engineers. They love logic. They think logical. Even architects like to think logically. And they assume, well, it's logical, you should buy. And that's what frustrates so many salespeople. It's so obvious to me why you should buy, and you're not buying. So you have to first become aware that people buy emotionally and then back it up with logic. For example, if you go buy a luxury sports car, they're not talking to you about miles per gallon. That's the logic. They're talking to you about how good it's going to feel, how sexy you're going to look, how much fun it's going to be to drive, all those emotions. Even a house is an emotional buy for most people that's backed up with logic, unless it's strictly an investment property for renting. But your own home is usually very emotional. So storytelling is our way in to people's emotions, because we're wired for stories. If I say to you, Maria, let me give you some facts and figures, you're on your left side of the brain analyzing it. But if I say, let me share a story with you, oh, our brain instantly goes, I can relax. Maybe this will even be entertaining. And so the use of storytelling in the sales process is so key in 2 steps. The first part is the team slide. I was working with an architecture firm on a $1 billion sale renovating an airport. The stakes were really high. And the client had said to this architecture firm and the other 2 in the final 3, we're going to hire the people we like the most, because we have to work with you for 6 years. You could all do the work. And that's when they called me in and they said, listen, you gave us a great talk and a workshop, but we need your help specifically to win this. And so we were looking at the team slide, Maria, and they said, oh, if we run out of time, we'll skip this slide. And I said, whoa, did you not hear the client say that's the likability is the #1 criteria? This is the most important slide. Oh, I said, okay, so what are you going to say? They show pictures of all the people on the team if they get the job. Well, I'm Bob, this is what I do. I'm Sue, this is, I go, oh, okay. Bob, what made you become an architect? Well, when I was 11 years old, I played with Legos. Now I have a son that's 11, I still play with Legos, and I have that same passion as I did for this project. Great. Sue, where did you work before here? Oh, I was in the Israeli army. Great, you're gonna bring that same discipline and focus into making sure this project comes on time and under budget. So that's the first use of storytelling. As you can see, suddenly they felt like they remembered those stories. Otherwise, if it's just presentation after presentation and no one's saying anything personal or memorable, it all just blurs together. But those stories made those people feel like, we like those people. So I have another example of it if you want, but I thought I'd pause and let you comment on that use of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's fantastic. And it's true, as you say, you remember stories, you don't remember the facts and figures, and also you relate them to that person. So you remember that individual as well, which is really great. Share your other story. I like stories.
Well, yes. Well, then it goes, obviously part of any big presentation to win a big account like that is what's known as the case studies. It's been around for decades. We're going to show examples of other clients we've worked with. Even the word study sounds boring to me, doesn't it? It sounds like homework. So I tell my clients, we're going to turn those boring case studies into case stories. And they're like, what does that even look like? We have some pictures of another airport we redesigned. We thought we'd just show that and move on. And I said, there's no story there. So here's the story that got them to win the $1 billion renovation. 2 years ago, JetBlue hired us at JFK to renovate the airport. And during that multi-year process, one of the things we had to do was rip off all the floors in the middle of the night between 9 p.m. and 9 in the morning so that we could recable everything, and that the stores needed to open at 9 so they wouldn't lose any revenue. So we had all of our vendors on call, anticipating any problems that might happen. And sure enough, at 2 in the morning, a fuse blew. We had that vendor there in 20 minutes, fixed it, and at 8:59, the last tile went down and all the stores opened on time. And now a year later, sales are up 15% because we've designed a place that pulls people in and keeps them shopping and spending more money. So that suddenly takes you there. Now, the elements that make that a good story that people don't realize is the exposition, the who, what, where, when. We're looking, we know exactly where we are. Then we describe the problem. And the better you describe the problem, Maria, the better your new potential client thinks you have their solution. The whole goal of telling a case story is to get the potential client to see themselves in the story. And you're not the hero, the client is. And you see the difference between getting up there and saying, we use critical thinking to anticipate problems. And they told a story showing it by having vendors on call. And then a little bit of drama at 8:59, the tile went down. And then the secret sauce is resolution. What is life like after your solution? And that sales being up 15%, measuring that. So that's what people love to learn how to do. So storytelling gets you that emotional connection, likability factor, and then it turns your boring case studies into case stories that people see themselves in those stories. And then guess what? You know, the old closing tool is, do you want to buy? What, do you have any questions? But now at the end of a story like that, they would literally say, does that sound like the kind of journey you'd like to go on with us?
Mm.
Yes. And it's a much different closing question.
Well, yes, absolutely. In fact, so basically, you are a storyteller rather than a salesperson, exactly as you said. I was going to ask you what makes a good story. You've told us, you've taken us through it. That's lovely. That's great. And I was there. I was actually in that place. I was seeing the floor going down. I'm watching the
Love
clock.
it.
Your imagination is really good. It's really strong. So, tell me, why do we have to be taught how to tell stories? From little kids, we read a good night story, films that
Yes,
we watch. There's stories everywhere. We're surrounded by them. Why do we
we
have to
are.
learn how to tell them?
I think the biggest reason we have to learn how to tell them is while we've been growing up, and it's literally in our DNA. If you think back to prehistoric times, people sat around the glow of campfires telling stories to pass on, and children love to hear the story of the day they were born or how did mommy and daddy meet, right? We love those stories, and yet we're not taught how to tell those stories. And so one of the things I do in my keynotes is to tell, there's 4 genres of storytelling. And if you start looking at movies in a different way now, and then you start to look at brands messaging of how they're using that genre, and then people can start to become great storytellers and figure out which genre they want to be telling. For example, I was speaking at the Coca-Cola Summit for all the clients that sell Coca-Cola instead of their competitor at quick service restaurants and things like that. And there's one company, Aunt Anne's Pretzels, and they're in airports and malls. And I said to the CMO, how did this all start? I love finding that story of origin. And he said, oh, she started selling pretzels at a farmer's market. I said, that's the rags to riches genre. That's Cinderella.
Mm.
So you really start to see how branding and marketing people can use different genres of storytelling to literally figure out what their story is going to be. Interestingly enough, the CMO of Domino's Pizza is in charge of marketing. And I said, what's your biggest marketing challenge? Getting tech people to come work here. I said, oh, you just assume marketing is always outward facing. But he has a tech team. They built this app that tracks where your pizza is in the delivery process, who's building it and who's putting it in the oven and all that stuff. And he said, we used to say that we are a pizza company who uses tech. And now we say we're an e-commerce company that happens to sell pizza.
Mm.
That's the rebirth genre. You've completely reframed your story. So, and Prudential does that with their branding too. They said, your retirement's not just a continuation of middle age, it's a rebirth, your third act. Let us help you get there.
Yeah, I'm at that age. I'm my third act very soon. Let's not talk about that. Brilliant. Brilliant. That's fantastic. So listen, one of the things which I said in the introduction is that you can make clients can become drawn to you. You become magnetic to them. In fact, and you
Yes.
talk about going from invisible to irresistible. How can I do
Yes.
that? How can I become magnetic, John?
Well, stories pull us in. The old way of selling is just to push out a bunch of information and hope some of it sticks. And Maria, the premise that's based on, we've heard this lots of times. Oh, you got to get people to know, like, and trust you, because then they'll buy. So salespeople go, okay, you got to know my product. So that's what causes the pushing out of information. My premise is the new way is start from trust. It's a gut thing. Get people to trust you like a fight or flight response. It's safe to interact. It's safe to open my emails, whatever. The handshake came about to show you didn't have a weapon in your hand. So if we start with trust, then move to the heart, the likability factor. Do I like you? And the best way to increase your likability is to show empathy, that you understand their problem, been in their shoes even. And then you move to the head. And even then in the head, it's not, do I want to buy this? It's, will this work for me? Which is then tied into the storytelling of, do I see myself in the story? So in addition to storytelling, one of the outcomes and takeaways from my talks is I create a roadmap for the salespeople. The old way of selling again is, oh, we have a 90% chance that person's going to buy 50% and 20. The problem is nobody thinks of themselves as a percentage, and you're looking at people through your lens. So I flip the script and I tell people, let's ask ourselves, how do people see us? Are we invisible? They've never heard of us or our company. Or are we insignificant? You're selling life insurance, I'm not in the market for that. Or are we interesting? And this is where a lot of salespeople get stuck. They go, oh, they're interested. They ask for information. I'm sure you've experienced this yourself sometimes. We go, send us some information on your bureau or this particular speaker. And you go, oh, I think that's like being stuck at the friend zone at work. Right? It's just because someone's interested in you doesn't mean they're going to hire you or go out with you, right? So how do we get up to the next rung, which is intriguing? We have to come up with an idea or say something that makes people say, oh, that's intriguing. Tell me more. How would that work? And then you get to the top, which is irresistible. And that's where people love you. They become your brand ambassadors. You're like, I had the best experience with Maria's bureau, or John is speaking, and they just love to talk about you. The trick here is not to take those clients for granted, like any relationship. So what can you be doing to reinforce your irresistibility to keep those people there to get referrals? And so this roadmap is a huge takeaway because people start writing down 1 or 2 clients on each rung of the ladder. And then we work together with their management team on brainstorming what story could we tell to move someone up just 1 rung. And so the storytelling with that roadmap ladder is game changing. It ultimately makes the sales take off.
I love that. I've written, you could see I was taking notes there profusely there. So I've written invisible, insignificant, interesting, intriguing, irresistible. Have I got them
You
all?
got it. Perfect.
Lovely. Love that. Love that. Really love that. It's an interesting way of actually categorizing all your prospects and clients instead of saying,
Exactly.
oh, it's a great way of doing it. I love that. So one of the other things you talk about is confusion and the effect that confusion has on the sales process, if you like,
Yes.
on the story. Talk me through that. Why is it a problem?
Well, the first part is the confused mind always says no. And most people's ego will not interrupt you and say, I'm sorry, you said an acronym, I don't know what that means. Or this is just too complicated to do. And I think another story of that would really bring this home because, again, I was working with Olympus, which is the camera company, and they have a medical division. And they had me give a virtual talk and keynote on helping their team become storytelling. They were committed to getting storytelling as part of their culture. And so when I was working with one of the salespeople, I said to her, what are you saying to doctors to get them to buy your equipment versus your competitors? Well, our equipment makes the surgeries go 30% faster. Now, while that's not confusing, the confusing part is, why is that important to me? There's no story there. You're making me do the math of, would I make more money by that factor? So I said to her, let me ask some questions. What's the typical surgery without your equipment? 2.5 hours. Okay. And do the math for me. What's 30% faster? An hour and a half. Got it. So here's your story to tell another doctor. Imagine how happy Dr. Higgins was at Long Beach Memorial when he was using our equipment and he could go out to the patient's family in the waiting room where every minute feels like an hour earlier than expected to tell them their loved one made it and did not have cancer from the scope. That doctor turned to me afterwards and said, this is why I became a doctor, for those moments. And when she was telling that story to another doctor, he said, that's why I became a doctor too. He saw himself in that story. I want your equipment to have those moments. So it wasn't even an analytical decision of, oh, let's do the math on how many more surgeries and how much more money we can make for the hospital going faster. It was the patient's family. And they said, that gave us goosebumps. We're not telling stories. And even if we were to try and tell a story, we never thought of the patient's family being a character in our story. And we just love that so much because we do care about those people.
I've started to get a bit emotional about that. You
Yes.
are a good storyteller. You had me at the story. So the other thing you talk about is fear. How does that fit?
Well, we have multiple fears. And so for me, what I had to do, I'll give you an analogy. You know, when I decided to launch my podcast, I thought, I'm afraid of this, and I'm not even sure what I'm afraid of. So when we identify what we're afraid of, it really helps. So the first fear was the fear of rejection. Like, what if I reach out to somebody famous and ask somebody to be on my podcast, like a Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank, or someone, you know, one of the Chicken Soup authors? They're going to say, do you have how many episodes? It's a new podcast, right? So they might say no. So I went, okay, the fear of rejection. We've already touched on that. Never reject yourself. Okay, what else am I afraid of? The fear of failure. What if I have a podcast, nobody listens to it? I'll be embarrassed, wasted money and time. And then I had a guest, he said, failure is just feedback. You keep going until you get a zombie idea so great it won't fail. So you don't take it like it's not devastating. Oh, that didn't work. What else? And then you start looking for other stories of, you know, how many times did it take Edison to get the light bulb? Orville with, you know, the flights that you just keep, that's just feedback. That didn't work. Let's keep going. And the big one for me was the fear of the unknown. What mic do I buy? How do I post this, edit this? And luckily for me, I found a company that's what they do, Done For You Podcasting. So they take care of all that stuff and told me exactly what mic to buy. So I thought, the fear of the unknown, don't go it alone. And when I'm working with corporations and companies, I tell the people in the audience, you've got a support staff here. You've got marketing helping you if you're in sales. You've got management. Don't go it alone when you're trying to figure out these problems of how to move somebody up the rungs of those ladders. Don't go it alone. So don't take rejection personally. Failure is just feedback. And don't go it alone when you're facing the fear of the unknown. And we're all experiencing the fear of the unknown right now. And yet we need to collaborate and brainstorm together of how can we turn these events into virtual events, and how could we make it even better? And there's lots of tips and tricks I've learned doing that. I'm happy to share if you're interested in hearing them. But sometimes we think, oh, that's so unknown what it would be like to give a virtual talk to 200 people. And yet there are ways to make it just as engaging sometimes as when it happens in person. And I think, Maria, sometimes when people are in a place of the unknown themselves, you realize that's happening in your audience, and they're so thirsty for some motivation, inspiration, and new tools on how to cope with this unknown fear. For example, with Olympus, those reps are normally in the operating room. And now they can't be. There's a shortage of masks, and it's not, you know, safe for everybody to be in there that doesn't absolutely need to be in there. So they've had to come up with new ways to get their camera equipment in there so that if the doctor has questions, they can ask the rep virtually. So just helping people navigate that fear is such a big outcome that people then say, oh my God, this is not just good for my career. This is good for my personal life. And that's really when I feel like I've hit a home run.
Oh, fantastic. Love that. Thank you. Thank you for that. So you've had huge success as well. Something else that might make you a little bit fearful. TED. You've had a huge success with your TEDx. What was it? 1 million downloads, 1 million views, which is just phenomenal. I'm going to read the title so I don't get it wrong. Be the lifeguard. See, I got it wrong anyway. Be the lifeguard of your own life, she says, putting her teeth back in. Can you share a couple of the main takeaways from that?
Yes, ironically, it's about embracing disruption. And the premise is we all have to be our own lifeguards. No one's going to come save us like they do in a hurricane when they send a helicopter in if you didn't evacuate, when we get disrupted. And having been a lifeguard, I tell the story of a little girl drowning and how my instincts kicked in from all my training and I didn't panic and stayed calm. And that aha moment is what served me throughout my entire career, so that when I was laid off in 2008 from Conde Nast, when the economy was in such bad shape and the luxury market was tanking, that instinct kicked in. And they were laying off everyone in the outside offices out of New York and 30% of the New York staff. And I said to my publisher, when she told me I had to be out by the end of the day, well, don't you want a status report to show where the ads should be? She goes, well, that would be great. Everyone else is so angry, they're storming out. But I'm not going to do that to my clients. And little did I know, Maria, that one decision would help me 2 years later when they reached out to me after I had another job and hired me back. So that mindset of staying calm and not panicking under stress, from a lesson from being a lifeguard, is the through line of what that's one of the big takeaways. And then ironically, I ended up winning Salesperson of the Year for the entire company of other 400 salespeople around the world. And my big aha for myself was, as I'm holding that award, being applauded in this big event, I'm the same person. Whether I get laid off or I'm winning this award, it's 2 years apart. And I thought, no longer will I go on this self-esteem roller coaster of only feeling good if my numbers are up and bad if my numbers are down, or bad about myself if, we're in a pandemic. I'm not going to let my self-esteem go up and down like that. I used to do it and it was exhausting. And so my big mission is to help as many people as possible, whether in sales or not, get off that self-esteem roller coaster.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Listen, I could talk to you all day. We've rapidly run out of time, but there's a story I want to know. I do want to know
Yes.
what life lesson you learned from Michael Phelps. Leave us with that story.
Ha ha ha. Yes. Well, I have to paint the picture. So several years ago, when I was working for a fashion magazine selling advertising, Speedo was in my territory, the swimsuit company, and they were coming out with a line of sportswear for the first time. And I reached out to them and I said, would you consider running this campaign in my magazine? They go, no, we're running it in fitness magazines. And I said those two magic words I mentioned earlier, what if we treated your sportswear like it was high fashion and had a fashion show with models wearing it around a swimming pool, and you could invite Michael Phelps since he's on your payroll, we could get a lot of publicity about that. They liked that idea, gave me the sale, and more importantly for me as a former lifeguard, I got to meet Michael Phelps. And I went up to him and I said, Michael, everyone says you're such a success because your feet are like fins and your lung capacity is so big. I'm guessing there's something else. He said, yes, John. When I was young, my coach said to me, Michael, are you willing to work out on Sundays? Yes, coach. Great. We just got 52 more workouts in a year than your competitors. So the takeaway for the audience is, what are you willing to do that your competitors are not or haven't even thought to do? And people love that story because they realize if I want to be at the Olympic level of my business, I need to be willing to do some things that others aren't. And then I add in or haven't thought to do. And so that is my huge takeaway from meeting the wonderful Michael Phelps.
What a great takeaway. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much, John.
My pleasure.